The courtroom went quiet as the tomb guard stepped forward, his shiny boots making a sound like a metronome. Corporal Ethan Carter stood straight in the clean uniform of the Third Infantry Regiment. The Medal of Honor shone on his chest. Some people were in wonder, while others couldn't believe what they were hearing. Judge Hargrove leaned forward and said in a voice that was as sharp as a knife, "Corporal, take off that medal. This isn't a parade, it's a courtroom." Ethan's eyes were fixed on the judge, steadfast and unyielding. The air got so heavy that it stopped hearts. No one knew that a former colonel in the back seat who owed Ethan her life was already getting up and ready to tell the truth that would destroy the judge's power forever. Before we get into this story, don't forget to subscribe with the bell notification on. Also, tell us, where are you watching from? Please tell us in the comments. And if you still think that principles like honor, bravery, and sacrifice are important, help us keep their memory alive. The smell of wet grass and history filled the air in Warrington, Virginia in the morning. The modest courthouse, a short brick building with lofty windows and a colonial-style steeple, was in the middle of town. The hardwood flooring creaked when you walked on them, and the ceiling fans slowly turned, moving the stale air around. There were more people in the courtroom than usual, but not because of the case, which was a boring fight over a rural road easement. It was because of a man. Word spread across Warrington like fire through parched brush. A tomb guard who was still on duty was going to testify. Not just any tomb guard, but one who wore the Medal of Honor, the highest military honor for bravery in the country. The whispers had gathered a crowd, locals, veterans, and a few reporters, all jammed into the seats, staring at the door. The bailiff's voice broke through the noise. "All rise for the Honorable Robert Hargrove." The throng stood up, and the chairs scraped as Judge Hargrove walked in. He was 60 years old and very tall. His face showed signs of years of being in charge. His black robe hung over his shoulders like a cloak of power, and his gray eyes looked around the room with the sharpness of a hawk. He sat down, fixed his glasses, and nodded to the bailiff. The bailiff's voice rang out again. "Call the first witness. Please take the stand, Corporal Ethan Carter." The room went quiet, the type of quiet that makes your chest feel heavy. When the door opened and Ethan Carter walked in, everyone turned to look. He was 28 years old, tall and skinny, and his face looked older than it was. His eyes were deep with something that couldn't be read. His hair was cut short under his tomb guard cap. His outfit was perfect. The dark blue coat of the Third Infantry Regiment, white pants that were clean, and black shoes that shone like mirrors. With each stride he remembered the 21 steps, halt, turn, and repeat he had learned at the tomb of the unknown soldier. The Medal of Honor, with its blue ribbon standing out against the dark fabric, shone on his chest, just above his heart. Some people in the crowd were in wonder, while others were quietly respectful. A few veterans in the back rows straightened their hands and twitched as if to salute. Ethan got to the witness stand, turned quickly, and looked at everyone in the room. He moved with purpose, and each step showed how disciplined a tomb guard is. He stood still and waited. Judge Hargrove leaned in and narrowed his eyes as he looked at the medal. His voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Corporal Carter, take off that medal before you swear in. This is a courtroom, not a military ceremony." The crowd murmured, but it was electric. Ethan stayed still. He looked the judge in the eye, calm but firm. "With all due respect, Your Honor," he began in a low, calm voice, "this medal isn't mine. It belongs to the men who didn't come home. I wear it for them." The judge's expression changed. He leaned back and drummed his fingers on the bench. "I don't care who it belongs to, Corporal. This is my courtroom, and I make the rules. Get rid of it, or you won't testify." The air got thicker, and the quiet got more heavier. A woman on the third row held onto her pocketbook. An older man, a veteran with a worn-out army cap, moved around uneasily. Ethan's hands stayed at his sides, but he never took his eyes off of Hargrove. For a second, it looked like he may say no. Then, with the same care he took with every step at the tomb, he slowly reached up, took off the Medal of Honor, and put it on the wooden ledge next to the microphone. The sound of metal hitting wood was like a gunshot. Some people in the throng were shocked, while others were quietly angry. Hargrove nodded in agreement. "Swear him in," he told the bailiff. Ethan put his right hand up. "I, Ethan Carter, do solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God." The bailiff moved back. "You may sit down." Ethan sat down, but his back was still straight, and his eyes were still locked on somewhere beyond the judge. A young man called Paul Grayson, who was the plaintiff's lawyer and was wearing a pressed suit, came up. "Corporal Carter, please tell us your name and what you do for a living," he said. "Ethan Carter," and his voice sounded like gravel. Mu Shear, Third Infantry Regiment, United States Army, stationed at Arlington National Cemetery. Grayson nodded and looked at his notes. And were you there on the property in question on April 12, 2025, the day of the dispute? Yes, Ethan said. The questions kept coming, dry and procedural, concerning the easement, the road, and a fight between neighbors about who had the right to use the road. Ethan answered each one clearly, with short, clear sentences, but the people in the room weren't paying attention to the intricacies of the case. The metal on the ledge, which was shining in the fluorescent light, caught people's eyes. It had been taken off of Ethan's chest. The air felt strange, like a flag that had been flown upside down. Grayson stopped for a moment, feeling the tension. What did you see when you got to the property? Ethan bent over a little. I went to see my neighbor, Mr. Larson, to talk about the road. His family has lived on that land since the Civil War. I got there around 7 a.m. The gate was open, but there were two men I didn't know measuring the boundary with a laser device. They told me I couldn't be there. And did you? Grayson questioned. I've been able to use that road for years, Ethan added. Mr. Larson's dad worked with my uncle. When I was a kid, they gave me a key to the gate. Grayson nodded. Your Honor, I have no more questions. Richard Holt, the other lawyer, stood up. He was a smooth lawyer. He was younger, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. Corporal Carter, he said in a light but serious tone. You talked about a key. Can you confirm that it was given to you legally? Ethan's eyes moved from Holt to the judge and back again. It was a present from the Larson family. I've used it for 20 years and never had a problem. Holt smiled. 20 years is a long time. Memories can fade, right? Ethan's jaw tensed, but his voice stayed steady. I don't forget what matters. The throng moved, and a quiet buzz of agreement filled the air. Holt thought about it for a moment before moving on. So you're saying that you remember this supposed agreement perfectly? Ethan said. I know what I was told, and I know how much I owe. Holt's smile faded. Your Honor, I have no more questions. Judge Hargrove leaned in and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Let's keep this going. We're not here to talk about history or the war. We're here to get facts, not feelings. The words hit me like a slap. A man in the back row with a Vietnam veteran's cap on his head made fists. A woman muttered to her friend, That's not right. The mood in the room changed, and a wave of discomfort spread through the pews. Grayson stood up again, feeling the time slipping away. Your Honor, can I call the witness back later if I need to? Hargrove waved. Okay, Corporal, step down. Ethan got up and moved slowly. He looked at the metal on the ledge for a split second before turning and stepping down. The crowd stayed quiet as he went back to his seat. The metal stayed where he left it, a small bit that appeared to support the weight of the room. And then it did. There was a woman standing in the rear of the courtroom. She was 50 years old, had short hair, and her presence dominated the room without her trying. Ethan's commanding officer in Afghanistan was Colonel Sarah Ningwan, who is now retired. She wore a plain navy suit, but her stance screamed military. She spoke in a calm but firm voice. Your Honor, may I speak? Hargrove's head snapped up, and his glasses shone. This is a court of law, ma'am. Unless you're a lawyer or a witness who has been called to testify. I'm not either, Sarah said, cutting in with a calm voice. I'm Colonel Sarah Ningwan, retired from the U.S. Army. I served with Corporal Carter in Afghanistan. I was there when he got the medal you made him take off. I'd like to speak to this court. The room stopped. The bailiff even looked to Hargrove for help, as if he wasn't sure what to do. The judge's face twitched because he was surprised. He remarked, This is very strange. You don't have a right to be here. I have the standing of someone who owes her life to that man, Sarah remarked as she stepped into the aisle. Her voice was thick and low, like a drumbeat. In 2019, in Helmand Province, our convoy was ambushed. 12 of us were pinned down, taking fire from 3 sides. Ethan Carter ran through a hail of bullets to pull us out one by one. He carried me 200 yards with a bullet in his leg. That medal isn't a decoration, it's a debt. The gathering was quiet, and every phrase hit like a stone. Jake Morales, a freelance reporter with a YouTube channel, quietly raised his phone to record. He was in the second row. Hargrove's face turned red. Colonel, you're out of line. Sit down, or I'll have you thrown out. Sarah stayed still. With all due respect, Your Honor, you're the one who's out of order. Ethan Carter isn't just a soldier. He's a tomb guard. Every step he takes at Arlington is for the unknowns, for the men and women who gave everything. You asked him to forget them. You asked him to break his oath. People in the room started to whisper. A veteran in a wheelchair rose up slowly, his hands shaking. Another one came after that, and then another. They didn't talk. They didn't have to. Their silence spoke louder than words. Jake's phone kept filming, and the live feed got thousands of spectators. Hargrove hit the gavel. Order. I will have order in this court. But his voice broke, showing that he was nervous. The people in the crowd were no longer with him. Everyone was looking at Ethan, Sarah, and the medal that was still on the ledge. Ethan stood up again without being told to. He walked up to the witness stand, picked up the Medal of Honor, and held it in his hand. He didn't put it back on. He just held it, and his knuckles turned white. I'm not here for myself, he said, and his voice broke through the noise. I'm here for the men who never got to speak, the ones who never came home. The words hung in the air, simple but heavy. Sarah moved closer and stood next to him. This isn't about a road or a gate, she added, looking straight at Hargrove. You disrespected a man who has given more than you will ever know. You did it in front of his community, his brothers, and his country. Hargrove's hands shook as he held the gavel. He yelled, "This court is in recess," and got up from his chair. "Get out of the room." But the crowd stayed still. People came up one by one, including veterans, locals, and even the court reporter. Not to protest, but to be a witness. They stood for Ethan, Sarah, and the medal that was now in his possession. Jake's live broadcast got 10,000 viewers, then 20. Honor the fallen. Shame on that judge. There were a lot of comments. The bailiff wasn't sure if he should follow Hargrove's command right away. The judge stormed out, his robe flapping, and the place was silent, as if it were alive. Ethan stayed at the counter with the medal in his palm, and his countenance was hard to read. Sarah put her hand on his shoulder, which was a sign of respect. The throng started to leave, but not before a few veterans came up to Ethan and said hello, or nodded. You made them proud, one person stated. Ethan just nodded, his eyes far away. Jake's video had gone viral by lunchtime. It went viral on social media, and was shared by veterans groups, news sites, and influencers. The title was clear: Judge tells Tomb Guard to take down Medal of Honor. The words sparked a maelstrom of indignation, pride, and cries for accountability. The American Legion said, disrespecting a Medal of Honor recipient is a disgrace to our nation's values. The Congressional Medal of Honor Society wrote a letter asking Hargrove to apologize in public. Hashtags including Each Honor, Ethan Carter, and Justice for the Tomb Guard were popular by the conclusion of the day. Warrington was a different place the next day. Reporters set a camp outside the courthouse. Veterans stood in formation with American flags and held a silent vigil. Ethan didn't go with them. He was back at Arlington, walking the 21 steps to the tomb of the unknown soldier. His clothing was spotless, and his medal was back on his chest. Every step had a purpose, reminding him of the promise he made. Judge Hargrove quit a week later because of rising pressure. The courthouse put out a short statement, saying that Judge Robert Hargrove has elected to retire early for personal reasons. No apologies, no recognition, but everyone knew what was going on. The film, which has now been seen millions of times, had done its job. Hargrove's name went away, becoming a footnote in a story that wasn't about him. Jake Morales made a short documentary that combined footage from the courtroom with interviews with veterans, and a film of Ethan at the tomb, where his shadow was clear against the dawn. The last word of the video was clear. Honor isn't in the medal. The individual who keeps the promise is the one who does it. Ethan never talked to the media. When a reporter saw him outside his little flat and asked for his side, he shook his head. He said, "There's nothing to say. I'm just doing my job." He went back to the tomb, where the sound of his footsteps and the silence of the unknowns filled the air. But something had changed all around the country. The narrative of that day in Warrington became a touchstone that people told in VFW halls, military forums, and classrooms. It was a reminder that honor doesn't change, not for power, not for gavel, and not for anything else. Ethan stood alone by the tomb one evening, while it was lightly raining. The marble seemed shiny and damp. He ran his fingertips over the star on the Medal of Honor on his chest. He muttered, "For you," and then named the guys he had lost in Afghanistan, one by one. Sarah Ningwan, who was behind him in the shadows, observed him in silence like a sentinel. Ethan walked on, taking 21 steps, stopping, turning, and then doing it all over again. The tomb was quiet, but its voice could be heard all around the country. This is the story of a medal, a courtroom, a tomb guard, and a moment that changed what it meant to be honorable in a little town in Virginia. At the tomb of the unknown soldier, where every step is a promise and every pause is a prayer, the best way to honor the dead is to stand up to wrong. So take a break today. Remember Ethan, Sarah, and the soldiers whose names are set in stone. Share this tale not only to thank them, but also to remind everyone that decency, is the best way to measure service. If you ever go to Arlington, stand before the tomb, watch the guards' precise steps, and listen. You might hear the steady, unbroken heartbeat of a nation echoing through time,